Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and these are my pets, George the Gorilla, Kahal the Dolphin, and Frank the Sea Turtle. Today, I'm happy to announce that, for this review, we're returning to one of the most famous monsters of fiction of all time, with the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla. Seeing as how he debuted 70 years ago, let's take a look at the loving tribute to the franchise that came out in the summer of 2019, but not without diving into a little history first. 2014 Godzilla is a very divisive movie in regards to fans and critics. Some people, myself included, enjoy the movie for what it is, while others have strong negative feelings towards it due to the fact that it focuses more on the humans than Godzilla. That said, the movie was a hit at the box office, which led to kickstarting the franchise called the Monsterverse. While the second entry would focus on the other popular giant monster of film, that being King Kong, the third entry would be a follow-up to Godzilla, which would feature other monsters that populated Toho's film roster. Those being the Queen of the Monsters, Mothra, the Fire Demon Rodan, and the three-headed monster himself, King Ghidorah, as the main antagonist. The film was announced to be released to celebrate the 65th anniversary of Godzilla's debut back in 1954, as well as the 55th anniversary of the original clash of the kaiju with the 1964 film Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, in which Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan teamed up to battle the Titan in an epic battle. The film was officially released on May 31st, 2019, and received mixed reviews from critics and was a box office disappointment. That said, there are few fans and critics who actually enjoy the film as it is, and the franchise would get back on its feet 2 years later with Godzilla vs. Kong, which was the crossover everyone was waiting for. However, what are my thoughts on the second entry to Godzilla's Monsterverse story? Let's find out. This is Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Members of the cryptozoological agency Monarch face off against a battery of god-sized monsters, including the mighty Godzilla, who collides with Mothra, Rodan, and his ultimate nemesis, the three-headed King Ghidorah. When these ancient superspecies thought to be mere myths rise again, they all vie for supremacy, leaving humanity's very existence hanging in their balance. Okay, so, when I first saw this movie, I initially really hated it. I thought it was boring, way too silly, and not as grounded or as gritty as the first film, which, if you already know my thoughts on, you know why I had this thought in my mind. However, I recently rewatched the movie, and I have some new thoughts. While I don't think the movie is good, I don't think it's awful either. I actually really appreciate this one more with the fantastical tone, as that's what Godzilla's franchise is at its core, as well as the use of some of Toho's other iconic creatures. As far as the story and the human characters are concerned, there are moments where I enjoy the movie, but there are other times where I felt bored and wanted to watch the movie end faster. That said, this is a well-made film with some fantastic VFX and is indeed a loving tribute to the monster aspects of the original Toho films. That said, it isn't exactly a great film anyways, and I'm about to tell you why. So, out of all of the human characters, I only really liked 3 of them. The first of whom is Mark, who was played by Kyle Chandler. What's significant about him doesn't even have to do with the character himself, but rather the fact that Kyle Chandler was already in a monster movie. I'm of course talking about the Peter Jackson King Kong remake where he played Bruce Baxter. Obviously these two films are not connected in any way, but it was a neat little detail that I always like to think about. Regardless of that little point, I think Mark is the only one of these characters that goes through an actual arc. He lost his son during the events of the first Godzilla, which led him to distance himself from working with Monarch and his family, which included his young daughter and wife. When we find him, he's an older, broken man, but he is offered a chance of redemption, which he takes. And I thought that worked really well for him. Out of all of the human characters in the Monsterverse, I think Mark might be my favorite just because he was well fleshed out, more than any other character in the entire franchise. Enough said. Moving on to his daughter Madison, played by Millie Bobby Brown, I also thought she was really well done. You see a curious young girl, but you also see a human being ridden with guilt. She lost her brother and her father, essentially, and is trying to live her best normal life. But due to circumstances, she couldn't, and that really shakes her. At the end, we see that she's willing to risk her life to save the people from the monsters. And that's when I saw less of an actress in a Godzilla movie and more of an actual character. That's why I think the movie should have focused more on her relationship with Mark and how she tries to rebuild it, but that's neither here nor there. Finally, the only other character that I liked that was a human was Dr. Shirazawa. I've always made fun of Ken Watanabe, as you guys know, but I actually really liked his performance in this. He felt more fleshed out and more important to the plot, and I actually cared about him. I even cared when he died, and that's saying a lot because for the life of me, I can't remember a single contribution he made to the first film other than just, being there. Good job to the filmmakers and screenwriters, I guess. Now, as far as the other human characters go, I didn't like any of them. I'm sorry, guys. I tried. I really, really did, but I just didn't like any of them. Like, seriously. Bradley Whitford's Rick was funny, and there's not much other personality to him other than that. He just made me laugh occasionally. Emma Russell's motivations for doing what she did made sense, but I didn't like the way they executed her character. Thomas Middleditch's Sam was trying to be a comic relief, but he didn't once make me laugh. I probably smirked like one time. The soldiers were boring, and that sucks because O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube's son, and Anthony Ramos are amongst the cast, and those two are really great actors. Dr. Chen is forgettable, and that's about it. Finally, there's the villain, Jonah, played by Charles Dance. Can we just stop casting great actors in crappy or useless villain roles? That's 2 this season that Charles Dance was a part of, and that's unforgivable. He's just a guy in a suit, and that's about it. Enough said. Now, let's talk about the Titans, the characters you actually want to hear about. Let's start with Rodan. He had the least amount of screen time of the big 4, but I still think he was a force to be reckoned with. He's a giant magma pterodactyl. You can't say no to that at all. The action scene in Isla de Mara, where he chases after the hovercraft, was a great scene. That added a ton of tension previously lost within the runtime, and his inclusion in the final battle worked for me. I just wish we got to see more of him because, as it stands, he's still a popular monster amongst Toho's library. Moving on to the Queen of the Monsters, Mothra was utilized extremely well. She not only added to the plot in a great way, but she also has one of the best modern redesigns for any character I've seen. The design takes the original Toho version and perfectly recreates it, whilst also giving new ideas all on its own. Overall, she's a welcome addition to the franchise, and I hope to see more of her in the future. Moving on to the real villain of the movie, King Ghidorah was extremely entertaining whenever he was on screen. Each of the 3 heads have a personality, with the middle one being the one in charge, and the right head being as serious as that one, while the head on the left is the one that's a bit slower, per se. Other than that form of characterization, Ghidorah was a force to be reckoned with. Every single time he utilized his lightning ability, I was in awe of how much damage that thing could do. He definitely posed a massive challenge for Godzilla, and that is the best thing about him. Finally, of course, we have Godzilla himself. Let me tell you, as soon as he first shows up, the movie went from boring to interesting in about 30 seconds. Not only is he in the movie more, but he also feels more like a character, and that was great to see because I'm glad we have more of the big guy. And yes, I truly believe that this movie made Godzilla the true king of the monsters. Alright, that's all I have to say about the characters and the monsters. Some of the humans are good, but the rest suck, while the Titans are the best part of the film's characters without a doubt. Moving on to a positive note, the effects are great. From small things like the vessels and hovercrafts to the explosions and mass destructions to, of course, the Titans themselves. I think that the best part of this movie is the way it looks. The cinematography and effects are really the best parts of the movie to me. You could take any frame from this film and it would be a perfect computer desktop wallpaper without a doubt. That's the most positive thing I can say about this film in general. As far as the music goes, it was composed by Bear McCreary. I think it's at its best when remastering the original Godzilla themes, but the rest of it is pretty basic. I don't know, moving on to the action scenes when the monsters were involved, I was invested. I think my favorite action scene has to be the first fight between Godzilla and Ghidorah. The movie was very slow up until that point, and once these two started duking it out, I was more invested. The rest of the action scenes, like the scene with Rodan and the final battle, however, were pretty good. They were well put together in the end, and that's the best thing I can say about them. Overall, Godzilla King of the Monsters wasn't a bad movie, but it is still very problematic. I'd say watch it if you're a big fan of Godzilla, but other than that, I don't have much else to say. It's just an okay movie that I wouldn't mind rewatching, which is why it gets a pretty basic 6.5 out of 10. Okay, that's over with. The next time I'll be talking about the MonsterVerse is with the finale, which will focus on the crossover films between Godzilla and Kong, which I'm excited to tackle. Until then, I'm going to be covering 2 more movies before I get to the beefy monstrous finale, which will be the final film in the Jurassic Park franchise, as well as 1 more traditional monster film. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, these are my pets, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week, and prepare for the end of this monster mayhem.